There's no wish, there's no sign from the universe, no falling star, no magic talisman, no compulsive routine that can turn these relationships around. That is the radical acceptance piece. This video is not just about intimate relationships, like, boyfriends, fiancés, spouses. It's not just that. It probably fits them the best, but it can be actually about the whole range of them, frankly. Parents, siblings, adult children, co-workers, bosses, friends. So let's break these 5 reasons down. And I'm going to be honest with you, the more of these reasons you are struggling with, the harder it's going to be to leave this relationship. Reason number 1, guilt. Interestingly, despite the fact that a narcissistic person has psychologically put you through the ringer, many people feel guilty about leaving these relationships. Remember that there was another video, I don't remember what it was called, but there's another video I highlighted that where I talked about how much narcissists struggle with abandonment. And that can really play upon a sense of guilt, because you don't want to abandon this person who's going to get so distressed after you abandon them. But your guilt may be coming from a variety of spaces and for a variety of reasons. You might have guilt about hurting other family members you actually like if you set boundaries or you step away. Guilt about the impact of leaving a relationship or a marriage on your children. Guilt about abandoning an adult child who treats you badly but just can't seem to get his or her life together. Guilt about hurting the narcissist's feelings. Guilt about leaving the narcissist to have to take care of themselves. Guilt about potentially doing the wrong thing, as it were, if you were to leave and then sort of making a mess of your life. Guilt about feeling beholden to a family or a marriage or workplace and feeling like you can't shatter that. Guilt, honestly, may be the strongest glue of a narcissistic relationship. It's sad, frankly, even non-narcissistic relationships. It's sad how many relationships are held together by guilt. And narcissistic relationships, most of all, because they are so confusing. The confusion can mean that people feel guilty because some days in these relationships are good, and then other days are not. The combination of the good days and the bad days means that boundary setting or just leaving the relationship honestly feels all but impossible because it's so confusing. Guilt is interesting because generally as an emotion, it's an emotion that gets evoked when a person believes that they have done something wrong. And it is often a pronounced dynamic in people who have originated from narcissistic family systems, because guilt was so often a tool of manipulation and control in their family of origin that it's honestly, in some ways, guilt becomes your first love language if you come from a narcissistic family. And adult narcissistic relationships are battlefields of guilt. Once any narcissist recognizes that guilt is a manipulation that works, and they tend to use it pretty universally, they will weaponize it and potentially keep you on the hook for a lifetime. This is on you to work it out, to do the legacy work and the deep dive to understand the guilt that keeps you stuck in this relationship. Only you can unpack this. Because honestly, once the narcissist figures out playing on guilt is going to keep you around, then you're really going to need to figure out a way to get more comfortable with the discomfort of guilt, or you're just going to be sticking around and putting up with it. The second reason people get stuck in narcissistic relationships is hope. This is the fuel that sustains all narcissistic relationships. Hope that it will get better. Hope that they will change. Hope that by future faking yourself, you can really trick yourself to believe it will get better after this happens, or it'll get better after that happens. It'll happen better in about a year or so. There's hope that if you change yourself, it will get better. It's really all BS because it's not going to change enough. Even if it changes a little, it's not going to be substantial. Narcissists are always going to invalidate and manipulate and minimize and abuse. It's what they do. And the hope of a someday better can last a lifetime. There is no deathbed confession. So stop waiting. What works here? Good old radical acceptance. And we know that one isn't easy either. But hope is what keeps these relationships going and keeps you stuck because you hope it will change. So here's my gift to you, my giveaway to you, I should say. You want to stay in the relationship, but stay. But stop with the hope. Stay without hope and see how that works out. Number 3 reason people stay, fear. Life post-narcissist is going to be full of unknowns. And obviously it's going to depend on the relationship. If it's your family of origin, parents or siblings or other family, extended family, it can be the unknown of what a life looks like without your so-called support network around you. It's interesting because many people erroneously believe that their family of origin is their so-called safe space. So the idea of going into a future without this so-called family safe space as a harbor feels scary. Some of this is asking yourself, really, is an invalidating or abusive space safe just because of a biological connection? And it gets complicated because there may be members of your family who are safe and others who aren't, right? Fear plays a massive role in keeping people stuck in intimate relationships. People fear, they'll ask themselves, am I always going to be alone if I leave? What if I never meet anyone else? Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm being too picky and all relationships are difficult. In that case, isn't it just the case that perhaps being alone would be better than if all relationships are like this? Listen, some people feel lost and they feel like they're half of themselves without a relationship. Frankly, that signifies work to be done in therapy to address your own sense of wholeness and never be seeking that wholeness in another person. Because seeking completeness in another person, frankly, is often a formula for meeting another narcissist, because they'll often take advantage of that kind of dynamic. Nobody likes uncertainty. And let's face it, the sad adage of the devil you know is better than the devil you don't often plays into that fear, that the familiarity with the known narcissist in your life may feel more certain than the fear of the unknown. Fear is a massive reason why people stay in narcissistic relationships. And the antidote is simple. Get comfortable with your own company. Stop falling for the hype that alone is always bad. Relationships and other people are wonderful, but only if they're healthy. People in relationships just for the sake of having them, not so much. Narcissistic relationships are frankly like empty calories. You feel full for a minute, but then you feel sick. The unknown is scary for all of us, but staying in an abusive relationship is also terrifying. Reason number 4 that people get stuck in narcissistic relationships, curiosity. Yeah, it's a reason why some people get stuck. They want to see what's going to happen next. It's like watching a suspenseful movie or TV show, like a horror movie or a TV show. You stick it out to see what happens next. The curiosity piece plays on dynamics such as hope, but it's more than that. For some people, the curiosity intersects with a sort of sense of stubbornness, I guess. I want to see what happens before I do the next thing, which should probably be getting out. For some people, the curiosity means that they just keep wincing and looking at their life like a sort of, again, strange horror film, curious to see where the monster jumps out of next in their life, kind of scared like, what's going to happen next? But you keep watching to see if you might have been right about them. I got to tell you, I've been guilty of this. I have stuck out more than a few narcissistic friendships and relationships in my life to see how bad it would get. It's sort of like a kind of the rock bottom we hear about in addiction. And the curiosity piece means that some people stay long past the expiration date of the relationship to see how low it goes. And just like any rock bottom, there is a point when you say, no more. Curiosity, sadly, can keep people around for years. And hope can fuel this fire. Listen, this YouTube channel is just one big spoiler about narcissistic relationships. You no longer need to be curious. I've already told you how all narcissistic relationships pretty much are going to go down. And the number 5 reason people get stuck in narcissistic relationships? A lack of knowledge. And that's why I do what I do. Because so many people don't get it. And I have worked with so many clients, talked with so many people, interviewed so many people who have said to me things like, I'm 50 years old and I've never heard of this narcissism, narcissistic abuse thing. I knew my marriage was a mess, but I was told that marriage is work. I didn't know that this whole mess that happened to me actually had a name. Lack of knowledge is what keeps lots of people stuck. I've actually been shocked and pleasantly surprised at how quickly psychoeducation, educating people about a psychological issue or dynamics, how quickly it helps many people. I'll discuss the architectures of these personalities, the histories, the patterns, the vulnerabilities. And once we sort of map it out and create the context, the client is often able to see the patterns and can make meaningful decisions for themselves that aren't based on childlike fantasies and hopes, but instead they're made from a place of hard reality. Education and knowledge aren't enough for everyone, and even with all the information about narcissism, there's still many people who are still lost in the hope, guilt, fear vortex. But for many people, it's just the knowing. And once they recognize that it is in fact a thing, they feel more sane and better prepared to make a decision. Now, I feel as though therapy with them is fitting them with sort of a suit of armor so they can better withstand the relationship, basically until they can figure out what to do. Now, for example, this YouTube channel is meant to be a place to get that information. Other people's YouTube channels on narcissism, my books, other people's books, all of the various blogs and everything else are various attempts, and my attempt, to address this gap in knowledge so people stop blaming themselves, stop gaslighting themselves, and can see the painful situation with clarity. Getting this knowledge isn't always easy. This is hard knowledge to digest. It hurts to see these patterns for what they are. But sometimes that painful clarity is the only way forward. So after seeing this, what are the reasons that you might be or have been stuck? How did you get past it when you were stuck? The more of these reasons that you have, the more stuck you are. But at a minimum, I do hope you can use this channel to put reason number 5 to bed. The other 4 reasons, those are up to you. But I'm confident that you can do it. I mean, listen, you came and you tuned into it. You want to hear what's going on, right? The journey won't be easy, but it is worth it. So let's know what your reasons are. And for those of you who are able to break through some of those, let us know how. So let's talk about this idea of sticking it out with a narcissist. I have recently been having some interesting conversations with people, and it sort of gelled for me and hit me that people don't like the idea of leaving the party too soon. They would rather be in a situation where they stay at the party long enough that they're like, yeah, I done seen this party through, versus leaving too soon and finding out, wow, things got actually pretty interesting. Now, you don't want to stay at the party so long that it's humiliating or embarrassing. A better example might be a casino table. Listen, what's the fear at the casino table? That the next hand I'm about to hit 10 blackjacks, right? And if I leave now, that's going to happen. But then if you sit and you bust 10 times, and you've lost a lot more money, now you've sat at the table too long. So let's talk about this entire model with a narcissist. And it may be a narcissistic partner. It may be a narcissistic friend. It could be a narcissistic coworker or boss or job or any of these things. Why do we stay around for so long? What some people want, and I see this now, and listen, I know some of you are thinking, oh, this is going to be true of me too. They want enough data. They want enough support for leaving so they feel confident that, yep, I know this was definitely not going to change. They kept staying. They kept staying. And you know what? And really, you guys, I'd love for you to think about this. I'm guessing that a lot of you actually didn't think it was going to change, but you wanted to be 100% sure that this pattern you were dealing with was indeed a pattern, no matter what. I'm amazed at how many people stuck it out like, all right, yeah, he cheated 5 times with 5 different people. I think we're pretty clear on what we're dealing with. Or he flaked on my important exhibition 3 different times. Yeah, I think I know what I'm dealing with. Or he missed the kids' soccer game 6 Saturdays in a row. Yep, I think I know, or 6 years in a row, whatever it is. You need enough data. You need them to yell at you enough, to lie to you enough, to cheat on you enough, to deceive you enough, to screw you over enough that you're like, yep, clearly established, this is a pattern. Here's the rub. I get it. Listen, I'm the first one to say, because I'm somebody who actually kind of does tend to get like a little bit, I'm prone to regret. So I like to be very sure, before I make a decision, sometimes to a fault. So a lot of us stick around so that like the day we walk out, there is not a moment of doubt. In fact, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on this. How many of you stayed at the party too long with a narcissist, stayed in the relationship too long because you wanted to be absolutely sure that this was truly toxic before you left? I'd be curious to think, how long did you stay? Like, how long do you think was too long? Did you stay 6 months too long? Did you stay 5 years too long? Would love to hear your comments on this one. But here's the thing. You stay that long, and then there's that day you're like, absolutely not. Like, this is not good for me. This is toxic. This is unhealthy. I'm out. But then the question becomes, in staying so long so you could have that conviction, how much harm did you do to yourself? Because while one could argue that the human psyche, the human spirit, the human soul is actually quite resilient, I've got to tell you that in the clients I've worked with who stayed in any kind of narcissistic relationship for a long time, these aren't just romantic relationships. These are with parents, siblings, co-workers, best friends, you name it. That the damage of this lasted for years. They still doubted their judgment. 5 years out, like, I don't know, maybe not, or maybe I'm wrong, or still second-guessed themselves. They still had self-doubt. It still impacted their self-esteem. They still weren't able to be kind to themselves. They still did all the second-guessing and the questioning of themselves that started in that relationship. So the longer you stay, the longer those echoes will last. Now, some of you might be thinking, damn, Dr. Ramani, this was my mother. I've been in this relationship my whole damn life. I get that. But the moment you realize what you're dealing with, I am not telling you to divorce your mother. I am telling you, though, to be realistic about what you're dealing with. So when your mom makes that mean-spirited comment about your weight, or your dad makes that really kind of underhanded, like, oh, I bet they're not paying you more for that promotion kind of comment, you have to have that internal chuckle, like, here they go again, I got this, and you almost smile knowingly to yourself, right? You may not be able to leave it, but the sooner you get that knowledge of what you're dealing with, you can set up the fences, you can set up the boundaries, so that at least you can maintain the expectations and at least create psychological distance, if not literal distance. That boundary line between the conviction of when you need to leave and the harm that comes from staying too long is one of the great paradoxes of a narcissistic relationship. I can't sit here and tell you how long is too long. Some people meet someone, and as we've clearly stated, narcissists are not black and white. It's subtle, and they may have certain qualities that are very compelling to you, even if they're just nostalgia and history. So we have our good moments. To get to that point of conviction takes a different amount of time for each of us. But you gotta ask yourself, how well do you really need to learn to take a punch? And I don't mean necessarily a literal punch, but how good do you have to get at taking on insults? The more we hear that stuff, the more it cuts away at our hearts, our minds, and our souls. The only way anyone in the world is ever going to respect you is if you're the first one to do it. And that can be very hard to do if you had narcissistic parent or parents and never got to learn that in the first place. It means that it gets harder to get to that point of conviction that it's time to go, and that you don't stay so long that you're at the point of harm. It's really robbing Peter to pay Paul. How long is too long to stay? And how much harm do you do to yourself if you stay too long? I wish I could give you an absolute answer on this one. It's not my place to tell you you've got to leave now. But I will tell you this. If you're dealing with a narcissist, no matter what, realistic expectations, radical acceptance, not personalizing, and trying to minimize the engagement, that is the best way to start so that you can figure out what your exit strategy looks like or how you're going to end up maintaining boundaries in this relationship in the long term. So let's talk a little bit about magical thinking and how it kind of comes into play and might even get people stuck in narcissistic relationships. So we once did a video on the sorts of obsessive compulsive patterns that survivors of narcissistic abuse can often experience. A sort of second guessing, double and triple checking, reassurance seeking. It's sort of a downstream result of being gaslighted. The sheer amount of self-doubt that can be inserted into a person means that a person in a narcissistically abusive relationship will end up engaging in strategies to offset that self-doubt. Now, over time, these patterns can certainly leave a person becoming really inefficient. All that time spent checking and checking again can obviously waste time and expend bandwidth. Narcissistic abuse survivors are already managing so much stress that the greater inefficiency of all this double checking and all of this doubt can take difficult situations and make them even more difficult, and even take the daily stressors of life and make those stressors far, far more challenging. Now, an interesting piece of this relates to something called magical thinking. Now, remember that narcissistic relationships are so founded on hope and future faking, this idea that it's going to get better, maybe someday it's going to get better, maybe I can wish it better or pray it better or manifest it better. Magical thinking is the belief that if you do things in a certain order or don't, you make a wish, notice a sign, that something you want will follow. For example, the clock will read 11:11 and a person makes a wish. If you say something at a certain time or in a certain way, something will happen. If you don't call someone for long enough, then they will call you. Whatever the strange correlation or line that people draw between these two or three things. None of it's based in reality, but it gives people some sense of control. In a narcissistic relationship, magical thinking can play out in many different ways. If I just don't do or say something, then things are going to be fine today. If I see a certain sign in the sky, then that means that we're going to stay together. If a person is out of the narcissistic relationship and hoping that it will still work out, it can be worse. All kinds of wishes and rituals and deals a person makes with themselves. If I just do this thing for 7 nights in a row, then they're going to get in touch with me and hoover me, right? There are few places in life where a person feels more out of control than in a narcissistic relationship. Things like logic literally seem to go out the window because nothing you do works. You're nice, you get raged at. You push back, you are raged at. You are compliant, you are gaslighted. You rebel, you are gaslighted. It can feel that nothing works. And that is actually a realistic assessment of what's happening. Nothing is going to work. If a person does not yet realize that this is a narcissistic relationship, then they may try to apply normal rules of human functioning and human relationships to this relationship and try to do things that would work in a normal relationship, like communicate or do nice things or express gratitude. But none of that works. There is no such thing as enough in a narcissistic relationship. That feeling of being sort of out of control in these relationships, coupled with the long-standing gaslighting, means that a person in one of these relationships is trying to find control somewhere, anywhere. And that is where the magical thinking can come in. Magical thinking is those little deals you make with yourself. If I do this, then this will happen. If I hold my breath by the cemetery, then this will happen. I'll be good luck, right? Magical thinking, especially in narcissistic relationship, can feel like these little hoops you make yourself jump through to make things okay. Making yourself last a certain amount of time without doing or saying something like calling or texting, or little deals, like I said, you make with and for yourself. It's almost like holding your breath and believing that if you hold your breath for long enough, that you will be rewarded. And you may believe that reward may be that today things are going to work out in the relationship. Not going to happen. It's all a throwback to childhood, isn't it? Step on a crack, break your mother's back. Wish on a shooting star. Make a wish on a penny you found in the street. When kids do that, it's sort of sweet. But I got to tell you, it's really treacherous in narcissistic relationships because it can keep you in something really toxic and get you stuck in these relationships, making these deals with yourself and believing that you have a little bit of control in a situation to make things better where you don't. And this can also foster self-blame. Well, this is all my fault because I called too soon, or I didn't make a wish at the right time, or I didn't manifest hard enough, or I didn't pay attention to that sign. Always comes back. All roads lead to self-blame in these relationships. The out of controlness of a narcissistic relationship is so agonizing. And as in any out of control situation, people want control through rational or irrational means. Magical thinking is an extension of some of those obsessive thoughts and compulsive behaviors people often have in these relationships. The idea that maybe, just maybe, if we got things just right, if I did things at just the right moment, that our wish that this relationship could work out, be easier, we could be happy. It's very intoxicating. The idea of being able to do something to steer our own destiny instead of feeling like we are living in a random universe where we cannot figure out how to please them. It doesn't feel good to feel like everything is just random and you can't do anything about it. Unfortunately, none of this works. Magical thinking or even non-magical thinking. There's no wish. There's no sign from the universe, no falling star, no magic talisman, no compulsive routine that can turn these relationships around. That is the radical acceptance piece.